If you're ready to make changes in your life, then stay a while and let deep conversation unlock the place you're most ready to transform. Welcome to Breathtakingly Imperfect, a podcast dedicated to exploring the human experience and sharing of heart-earned wisdom to help you live with love, presence, and freedom. I offer insights from my own journey of healing, peace, and personal growth in hopes of inspiring you to find meaning, fulfillment, and a true love for life. I'm your host, Yesenia. Let's walk this breathtakingly and imperfectly beautiful journey I call life. The purpose behind today's episode is to share what I've come to understand as the self in each of us, how to trust that inner relationship through embracing inner growth and personal values, how to carry it out into the world by navigating relationships and boundaries, as well as how to nurture self-strength through doing the things that inspire us and build habits that support our development. This entire journey of self-discovery and self-awareness started with the question of who I was outside of being mom and what the purpose was for my existence. It's where I began to view this garden I associate to my growth, experience, and development. The way that garden kept growing was through bringing awareness to the inner parts that made me me. And whether I was experiencing life from that part or the parts of others, shifting the focus from my outer experiences to the inner ones ultimately made space for the outer ones to be lived with much more consciousness and clarity. Consciousness meaning being aware of everything that surrounds and makes up our lives, and clarity being what you use to view the purpose of it as it pertains to that part of your life. Consciousness and clarity have evolved for me since starting this journey. I live them differently now, but in the beginning, they were what I used to pull back the curtain on different aspects of my life, as well as a tool I used to help me move past what no longer rang true to me. So let me explain. Where I'd respond, act, and do solely for the benefit of my outer circumstances, I learned to pay attention to what I was doing in genuineness to myself. And if whether or not it was in line with my personal values. This inner awareness I'm referring to is endlessly described in many ways, but is ultimately focused around the self. I've connected this to it being the deepest, purest, and freest part of us. For many of us, myself included, our sense of self has been buried underneath layers of living for the outside world instead of living from the very place that has the ability to take it in with a greater respect for our journey. Before beginning my own journey of self-discovery, the only times I had ever heard of the word self was when it was used to express things like being selfish, selfless, self-absorbed, self-centered, self-abuse, all but one with negative associations. But the word self itself has its own definition, and it's actually quite beautiful. According to Oxford English Dictionary, it's defined as a person's essential being that distinguishes them, emphasis on this next part, from others, especially considered as the object of introspection or reflective action. In other words, it's what's unique about each of us. Over the last 5 years, I've learned to listen to myself. It's, in my opinion, a right of way in the path of healing, and living with peace because it comes with growth and connection to our story and the way that it will flow. Being in tune with how I was connecting to life and what I chose to do increased the self value in my life. Finding deeper meaning in life meant connecting to this part of me I wasn't even sure existed. It felt like a right of way to experience some of the challenges I'm about to share. In hindsight, I was taught to be selfless. And while that unquestionably contributed to who I am as a person, it proved to be problematic and always centered around everyone else but me. One of my first true moments of creating change and growth by bringing complete trust to what I needed at my core was when I created a boundary that some called selfish. It did cause a disarray in our family dynamic, but was it really selfish? I was definitely probed to believe so at first. Moments just like the ones in which my outer experiences were burning shit to the ground and trying to create doubt in my choices, well, those are also the moments that required me to listen to myself, who I am at my core, and the values that rang so loudly for me. Without that connection to my inner self, I would have typically caved my stance for the sake of making others' circumstances better over my own. And after living for the external world for so long, my internal world began to feel more and more like home than ever before. Fortunately, pleasing for the benefit of others was not a part of my inner world anymore. I eventually end up deciding that the choice I made, though focused on me and not them, was not selfish. Having the ability to check in with how I felt and the actions I was taking helped me anchor down during that storm, no matter how they interpreted the situation. Placing their needs over mine was no longer what would maintain healthy and loving relationships, and what I foresaw would teach my kids the same. So any action outside of that would no longer fly. I welcomed doubt with retrospect and reflected deeply within. I learned to find distinguishment in whether the intentions were malicious, like they'd say. And for me, they never were, even if the others felt differently. Connecting to my inner self, I discovered, meant separating the self from selfish in order to finally secure its roots. Developing this part of me I wanted to live caused quite a shakeup in my family, especially when it came to detaching from traditions and norms I lived by. It was a time of my own personal trials and tribulation. For me, this was deciding on an action and having that decision be challenged as the wrong one. The kind of human being I want to be impacts my little family of four. And making changes also meant there was a pull within me that did wonder if I was being selfish. So then, what does it mean to be selfish? It deserves to be explored. I think that this is one of those words that is subject to interpretation by the individual as it pertains to their values. But if we get technical here, and actually look up what selfishness is, its definition by the dictionary is along the lines of lacking consideration for others and being concerned with personal profit or personal gain. Consideration, as in lacking careful thought, profit, as in financial, and gain is also inserted there to be associated with wealth. I knew deep within my heart the actions I decided I'd take were anything but thoughtless and definitely not done out of any personal gain aside the wellness and well-being of myself and my family. Unsurprisingly, as you can see, we all may be using that word not as literally as it's actually associated with profit and wealth or lack of consideration. I think it's important to be able to understand what it actually means because it could reshape the way we view someone else's actions and help us reflect when they require us to do so on our own. When you think of someone thinking of themselves, selfish will probably be one of the first words that comes to mind. Hey, they could very well be acts lacking in thought and profit driven. I'm not excusing that, which is literal by definition, but there's also the selfish that's tossed out in the heat of the moment. Those deserve the space for more observation, which is why it's helpful to know what it actually means. It helps clear the distortion created by our external circumstances. There were a ton of moments, still are from time to time, in which I struggle to determine whether the changes I seek are a road to my inner self or selfishness. And in those times, I've developed my decision making by reflecting on the purpose and intention behind the actions I wish to take. I do this through journaling, meditating, and talking things out through the two people I trust the most. I came out of those reflective situations discerning what I once believed was selfishness is actually self-development. My decisive actions always came from a place of love and sometimes just required a bit of introspection, which is why gaining knowledge on something as simple as a word can provide clarity to the situations we struggle with the most. I learned that worrying about the outcome of my decisions, especially when I acted from a place of love, was no longer my responsibility. I think that lacking consideration for others comes from a place of not caring. And believe me when I tell you, I did care. So when I decided I needed to move forward with change, boundaries were necessary. Like I said, changes felt like battles because it always just didn't involve me. It also meant my family was involved in the ride. For this same reason, I began to realize that the same inner awareness I was growing also existed for the people that make my home a home. Being able to bring back the focus to what was needed inside of my household was how I became able to re-centralize a balance between ourselves and everyone else, our inner and outer worlds as a family. I started to see our home as a central hub of energy. Everyone else and everything else that we were involved with was that constant circuit that flows to and from a power cord. And we were the power source. And just like extension cords overfilled with other cords, we needed to unplug what we didn't need and be intentional with what we did. This way of viewing how our family would balance tending for ourselves and for others really opened a pathway of understanding that we have the power to choose how we are vitalized or drained. My family and I continue to be selfless in areas of our lives that feel right and are part of the values we intend to grow. The opportunities we take part in, both with people or acts of service, leave us feeling energized and not depleted because they are ours to choose and not for the sole benefit of the external world. The result? It's being able to exist wholeheartedly for yourself and for others. Discovering even a bit of this version of myself that I was working on nurturing back to life came with a giant spotlight of challenges I had otherwise gotten really good at ignoring. It was a part of me I suddenly began to check in with and was gradually learning to trust. Being in touch with my most true self meant seeing everything I was doing involuntarily just for the sake of being accepted. I was not doing much of anything that felt meaningful to me. My family dilemma brought to the forefront what I needed externally. And internally, I realized I said yes more than I wanted to. It started with me. Power of choice was mine to pivot from things I no longer aligned with. Otherwise, I'd be actively self-sabotaging. That means going against what I felt was right for me. And there were lots of things. Self-sabotage can be something we do without realizing it at first, like listening to a chatty relative's gossip. Seems innocent enough, except now I felt clearly that it was not who I was as a person. I wasn't entertained by talking poorly of others. It was actually very draining, but I never said anything because I was taught to be respectful and nod and agree in the presence of elders and their gossip. I'd never given it thought otherwise, except I was on this journey of embracing me. And I had no desire to have that be part of my experience anymore. So I spoke up, faced some backlash, held on tight to my values. And in short, there are now stories shared with me and not gossip to have kept quiet out of what they considered and I was taught was respect would have meant a loss of respect for myself. The way that I like to view this situation was that where my path was diverted with seemingly innocent negativity, because it sure wasn't positive, it was now realigning and making way for a path without it. And I was more excited to be on that one. All right. So this wouldn't be my podcast if I didn't throw out at least one gardening metaphor. So here it goes. This is my garden. And I decide what gets planted here. Please take what you've planted in my garden back to yours and get the 7. And I'm only partly kidding on that last part. Connecting And living through yourself includes the way I choose to interact with people, especially because they are a part of my world, of my experience. And by choosing how I wanted to interact meant it would no longer be a one-sided experience, which was almost always their side. I was at the other end of that interaction too, fully capable of selecting what I wanted for my well-being. These were the internal battles in the external world. So it began the endless possibilities of listening and taking action to the things that dwelled wholeheartedly in the innermost parts of me, braving what the world would challenge me with, trusting I would choose for myself this time. I remember feeling so proud of myself for placing trust where there was once doubt and courage where there once was fear. I felt the strength in choosing for myself for the first time as an adult. This didn't mean I hadn't made choices before. Looking back at my life, I'm grateful for the ones I made. But this place from which I was now choosing from was different. I was making choices that were anchored in my being and not because of some outside influence or obligation or responsibility. I didn't know what would lay ahead of this new place I was choosing from, but I felt an inner strength that for the first time was not wrapped in fear. It made me feel ready to embrace everything the world would send my way. This was the first time I internalized peace. I used this trust and inner strength when I took on external situations that I considered to be me versus the world. And that had actually gradually become simpler to do. But somewhere down this journey of mine, I discovered that there was also me versus me. This was the self-sabotage I faced within. Self-sabotage is a choice. It's the obstruction of not doing what we know we need. And the more I trusted the deepest part of myself, the more I became aware of the instances I got in the way of my own experiences. So, what does that look like? Well, it's anything that deters our purpose, interests, or efforts. These are the things that exist beyond facing external challenges. They are the internal obstacles. And for me, it was a whole lot easier to distinguish the battles on the outside from the ones that were going on the inside. I've been my biggest critic, and I think most of us can relate to being the harshest on ourselves. Personally, I found self-sabotage anytime I had negative thoughts about myself, especially when they had to do with the things I wanted to accomplish, like starting a podcast. Aside from being unkind to ourselves, we also face instances in which we sabotage our own progress in the path of our journey. There are many ways we self-sabotage. And we are also the only ones that can discover exactly how we're doing it. If there's a path that we're on, an interest we're exploring, or an effort we're trying to achieve, and there's a deterrent, so like a discouragement in the form of fear or doubt, then it's worth asking, what's at the root of that procrastination? Why do I feel fear? What do I fear? Why am I doubting myself? And finding the answer requires the complete truth. That truth can be hard to accept sometimes because we want the illusion of the things we want. The truth lies in reality, which is defined as the state of things as they actually exist. The answers to some of these questions don't come right away, but just by asking them, a seed is planted. Becoming curious of the ways in which I self sabotaged has only ever developed my self awareness. It has helped me learn more about how I truly feel, the reason behind the things I do, and why I want them in the first place. A truth rooted in the depth of our truths. I believe that if the will is truly there, self awareness at any stage begins to highlight the things that grow you and those that don't. I found, once planted, the answers to the questions we have become very evident and hard to ignore. My other option was taking the route of not having to face the truth, sometimes too difficult to accept. That one continues on with the self sabotaging, unchecked and unchanged. That path, it stays blocked, not me. I was on a journey of complete flourishment. It took me over 6 months to even start to bring this podcast into fruition after just even initially deciding that this was what I was going to do. It's been its own journey. At some point, I asked myself about the procrastination. The next thing I know, I'm working through several layers of adversities that not only provided healing, but also brought complete truth about my past and my present. Most importantly of all, it solidified my purpose for this podcast, why I wanted to do this in the first place, and what I knew I was capable of doing during this whole and completely new adventure. Expanding my self-awareness helped me understand the ways I self-sabotaged, which allowed new paths to be paved by self-development. Developing my strengths made challenges I encountered less challenging. This was my first time developing on a personal level. It helped me embody the way I was reconnecting to what I now felt essential to my experience. I used self-development to continue making choices to progress and improve and explore myself. I didn't book a class or pay for any program. Self-development for me started with the small habits that eventually transformed into more impactful things. It's about taking the life you already live and making gradual choices that connect you back to you. For me, the child, reading and writing were just a couple of the things I loved doing the most, but had parted with as an adult. Developing my reading habits led me to start reading again. Because of it, I've gained such a greater understanding for the situations that surrounded not just me, but the people in my life. It helped me build compassion among many other things. Developing my writing abilities for me was just journaling again. This ended up being what helped me process so much emotional baggage, which reshaped the way I acted towards others. I didn't start reading and writing every single day. Like I said, it became a gradual choice that was true to me. And these seemingly naive things I loved and self-developed, they just further strengthened who I was as a person. They helped during challenging times because I'd never felt any more sure of myself, making it easier to clear up self-doubt. I've used self-development as a building block. Together, over time, these blocks reignited a passion for reading and writing that would inspire the way I wanted to be a part of this world. Writing helped me realize words provide transformation. And reading consisted of me finishing book after book, some of which completely changed my life and greatly contributed to the reasons I started this podcast. If I would have remained disconnected from the things that make me unique, I would have chosen comfort. And comfort is stationary. I would have never taken this challenging, but ultimately rewarding road of being able to express myself freely. On the journey of self-development, the action that moves forward is silent. That's because we have full responsibility and zero accountability with anybody else outside of ourselves. We have the power to deliberately sabotage as well as self-support. It's an internal drive, discipline, and desire to evolve solely for ourselves. Self-development to me simply meant bringing my actions into closer alignment with what I valued most about myself and my well-being. It was about living life from a place of intentional growth. Author Nicola Jane Hobbs of the book The Relaxed Woman writes, "Growth also emerges from the best and most beautiful moments in our lives. Powerful moments of awe, inspiration, and elevation rewire us. They push a mental reset button, replacing feelings of cynicism and despair with optimism and hope. While there is always uncertainty and normalcy, I want to continue to live more of the beauty of life. And for me, that meant growing through self-developing myself." So to recap, the self is the internal part of us that remains uninfluenced by the priorities of the external world. I've discovered that there is so much more meaning to life when you connect to the outside world the way you need to and not the way we're told to. If you're like me and spent most of your life doing for the world before doing for yourself, making changes will cause insecurities to rise within yourself and others. Finding and working with intention to create changes allows for clarity when there is pushback. It's what sets apart what we may be told or feel is selfish and what isn't. Living life from a genuine place requires that we take a longer look at everything in it and deciding what stays and what goes. It also means that we take an even deeper look at the things we are or aren't doing for ourselves. Self-sabotage is the choices that we make every day to advance or postpone the paths we want to create. And last but not least, remember, self-development is also a choice. It's a choice to evolve. It's a choice to reconnect and bring progress to the things that, even if faintly, beat in our hearts. I've talked a lot about the self, connecting to ourself, sabotaging and developing ourselves. I want to share that what I've come to understand is that it all starts and comes back to yourself. For such a long time, it was in my humblest of views to take into account everything and everyone else first. It came at the cost of losing sight of who I was as an individual. A disconnection is created because the values and beliefs of others take center stage over our own. Reconnecting to my inner voice required that I trust it when the world disagreed. After all, no one knows me better than I do. In doing so, I found the beauty for life, selflessness motivated by my values, honor for my life, and growth in the things that inspire me the most, all by simply making the choice to trust myself. The voice I'd hidden for so long, drowned out by the raging river my life had become, finally chose the waters she wanted to flow in, and in it found the confidence to navigate the rivers of life. I like to view life as our very own gardens, meant to be nurtured, cleared, and just allowed to bloom. So as you go on to explore your life's personal oasis, as always, may you leave here only with what can help yours grow. I am so grateful to have shared the space with you. And if this episode planted something within you, you can water it with me on Instagram, where this community continues to bloom. The link for that is in the show notes. Until next time, keep honoring your growth, trusting your path, and embracing this breathtakingly and perfectly beautiful journey that is life.